Namaste from India. My name is Hasina Parveen. I am talking today with Dr. Alfredo Sfeir Younis. He is a well-renowned and highly respected personality from Chile. He is the former presidential candidate of Chile, a former representative of the United Nations, and a former director of the World Bank. Currently, he is the president of the Zambling Institute for Human Transformation, an organization dedicated towards creating a grassroots world forum on human rights and human responsibilities and mainstream spirituality in public policy and business. He is an old and close friend of mine and a mentor to me. Through today's discussion, we will explore with Dr. Alfredo sustainability, spirituality, societal harmony in the world today. And we'll share, he'll share his profound wisdom with our viewers. Hello, Dr. Alfredo. How are you?
Hello, how are you? Hasina, namaste from Chile.
Namaste. I'm
I'd
very
like
fine,
to
thank
send
you.
the warmest greetings to the people of India, to the people of Rajasthan, and a big hug to the pink city of Jaipur.
Dr. Alfredo, you are well-renowned as a Chilean economist, a spiritual leader and healer, and the president of the Zambling Institute for Human Transformation. I have a lot of queries about each one of those, and I would come to that shortly, please. But first of all, please share with our viewers your experiences with the United Nations, the World Bank, and politics in Chile.
Well, thank you very much again. I'm so happy to be here. The experience of the United Nations was between 1996 and 2003. And it was the time that I was nominated by the World Bank as the World Bank's special representative to the UN. It's like an ambassador, but not an ambassador. It's a representative to the UN. And I had two assignments. One assignment was in New York, and the other assignment was in Geneva, because the UN is also in Geneva. In New York, I was basically dealing with global issues, how the World Bank contributed to these global issues like globalization, like how to deal with the global public goods like climate, like oceans, how to address at the time the structural adjustment programs, which means how to change prices, taxes, subsidies so the economy can grow faster. I was also part of the foundation of the Millennium Development Goals. Now they are the Sustainable Development Goals, and also dealing with issues of civil society and the NGOs. In Geneva was different because in Geneva I dealt with international UN organizations like the International Labour Office, ILO, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the International Commission on Human Rights, or many others like the UN agencies for refugees. And I spent a lot of time in the International Commission on Human Rights when Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, was there as the High Commissioner. So I was involved very, very much on issues of economic, social, and cultural rights, like the rights of education, health, food, water, housing, etc., and also the right to development. I would like to say that this was one of my richest assignments in my professional career. At the World Bank, which was my alma mater, I entered as a young professional, and then my first assignment was in India, and Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan in a very important agricultural extension and research project. I also work in Gujarat with the Gujarat Institute of Area Planning on a lot of research on agriculture. I must tell you, Hasina, that India was love at the first sight.
Wow.
I felt at home. It is a magnificent society. I keep going to India very often. The World Bank changed not only my profession, but also changed my personal life. I was involved in the creation of the environmental department. I work in West Africa, in the French African-speaking countries. But most important of all, I spent a lot of years writing global policy, like in fisheries, in biodiversity, desertification, energy in agriculture, and so on and so forth. And I must say that in the end of my career at the World Bank, I spent a lot of time on something that needs to have more attention today, which is on human rights and economic development. Where does this whole area of human rights fits into everyday economic, business, and institutional development? So two aspects of my life in which I spent in total like 30 years. So plenty of my life was invested in that. And I'm very, very happy to have done it.
Wow. You know, your life journey is an inspiration. Every time I talk to you, I feel ever more enlightened and energized. The entire world must be, introduced to your philosophies, thoughts, and simple solutions to be, to basic issues about which we will talk in a moment. So, you have written several books, including Conscious Sustainability Leadership, a new paradigm for next generation leaders, and Sustainability Beyond 2030, trajectories and priorities for our sustainable future. What kind of economic policies and philosophies should countries follow so human sustainability is not challenging for the future generations?
Hasina, this is such a fundamental question when you say sustainability is not challenging for future generation. I like to start saying something on the spot with no much dressing. Mm-hmm. Human sustainability for future generation is the greatest moral imperative that we as a generation have to address. I don't know if there are policies that fit everything or policies that will be able to finally arrive at this world that is sustainable, but I would like to share with you and all your viewers a few of them that it seems to me we need to pay attention, needs to be fundamental for everything we do. The first one, we must arrive at a consensus of a planetary vision for humanity. We live in a planetary world today. What happens in one corner of the world affects every corner of the world. And we need institutions, we need governments, we need corporations to understand that we are in this planetary society. International organizations today are not planetary because the countries claim their own individual interests. There is not this planetary vision where everyone is going into that direction. The second one, I think, as a policy, is to construct a life-sustaining civilization. This is a big name, life-sustaining civilization. We cannot keep going into an homocentric development, of the planet. We need to consider all forms of life, sentient beings and nature as part of it. This is so central because we are destroying, the planet every day at a very fast rate. The third policy that I would recommend will be to empower citizens. This is to say that development cannot disempower people. And this is what development is doing this day, to disempower people. People feel disempowered. They do not participate enough. They do not become part of development. The fourth policy I would say that I learned in all this life, in all this life as a professional, is that we are transitioning from pure market economics to human right-based societies. This means that economic, social, and cultural rights are becoming far more important than we ever thought before, and also the right to nature. A fundamental policy for future generation must be our capacity to really manage the global public goods of the planet. This is what we are going to leave them as a heritage. This is our lineage with the future generation: climate, biodiversity, oceans, rivers, mountains, glaciers, but also as a global public good, stability, migration, and security. But nothing of this can be done without an increase in human collective consciousness. This is a fundamental policy that must change dramatically what we're doing in education today. I know there is more awareness today on this issue, but it's not enough. This new consciousness needs to bring a new definition of development and progress. It's not just individual materialism. It's not just matter. It's more than material things is also non-material spiritual things. So essentially, to advance, we need a new eco-morality, that is to say, we need to have a code of conduct for bilateral and multilateral relationships. And finally, you mentioned my book with Marco Tavanti on the agenda post-2030. And there are many policies, but I like just to list a few of them that are important. First of all, a new Bretton Woods agreement. World Bank, IMF, WTO were created at the end of Second World War. Now the world has changed. We need a new agreement. We also need a new Treaty of Westphalia. The Treaty of Westphalia, for your audience, is the treaty that created nation states. It created borders of countries. So this is my country, this is your country, this is your country. But today, we live in a very interdependent world. So we need much more porosity, much more capacity to interrelate among nations. I also propose the creation of the World Environmental Organization. You know, today we have the UN environmental program. We need to bring it up if sustainability is a very important subject matter. We need to reform the UN. And most important, I claim for all political leaders, for all corporate leaders, we have to avoid a planetary collapse. We have a choice. The choice is ours. We need to do it now as soon as possible if the future generation will have really a future.
Right. Great thoughts, Dr. Alfredo. And undoubtedly, you know, you have shared simple yet highly effective solutions. We have been in touch and sharing thoughts for several years now. I must acknowledge that, you know, all your life you have passionately worked for the good of societies and communities in several countries through World Bank and the United Nations. After 5 decades of joining World Bank in 1976, please share what you find passionate today and how the Zambling Institute for Human Transformation is furthering your cause.
Wow, nice, beautiful way of putting it. You know, if you ask me what I was passionate about at 25, I would have answered a different thing. Today I'm 77, I will be 78 here, you know.
Yes.
So my passion today, really what makes me wake up every morning and be here with you in this program, you know, is human transformation, is healing the planet, is to bring peace, is nature conservation. You know, we need to conserve the creation, and it's the spiritual well-being of everyone. Now people might think this is very esoteric. It's not esoteric at all, it's very practical, because to construct a prosperous future needs a lot of action, needs a lot of engagement. So I would like to say that in my passion today, it needs a lot of study, it needs a lot of reading, it needs a lot of lecturing, it needs a lot of, you know, retreats, studies, to create a new narrative. I want to leave this word with you, narrative. We need a new discourse.
Right.
We need a new way really to explain what's happening and how we can resolve the problems of the world. Of course, I get involved particularly in eliminating suffering, you know, and inspiring the youth to make a big change, to get involved in this, you know. And I would say that last but not least, part of my passion is protecting the strategic ecological niches of the planet that are collapsing. This cannot be done. My problem now, it's not a problem, but it's a challenge, you know, at my age, is that this needs a collaborative work with others. This cannot be done by one person. We need together to do it. And I would say that India, in this planet, is the country primus inter pares to really take this passion forward together with universities, with political parties, with the spiritual groups in India, community leaders, media, government. This is the time to act. This is the time to act. Tomorrow will be probably too late.
It's truly amazing that even at age 77, you are deeply involved at the grassroots issues youngsters often dream to change the world. They must listen to you. Your ideas from around the world will definitely offer them fresh perspectives. The Indian youth would also find you highly relevant, as you have worked with several countries around the world, including India. And I must also mention that you have worked in Indian state of Rajasthan too. With all the experiences and wisdom you have collected throughout your life in economic and social sectors, what works best in any country for economic development and the social development?
Well, this is a question that brings me to some synthesis, and I will try to make a synthesis.
Okay.
I try to share my synthesis of my experience. I think what we have lost really is the most important policy, is the most important action, is the most important foundation, which is common sense. We have lost common sense. We don't need to study too much to protect the planet. We don't need to really have too many diplomas to respect your neighbor and so on and so forth. But I like to say that as an example of how we have lost this common sense is that we are destroying the same earth that gives us food. This is something that requires a much more thinking, than we give it to these dilemmas, this tremendous paradox.
Right.
I would say that there are 5 factors, if I can make a synthesis, some sort of universal to some extent, is the first one is, and foremost, is that development is about people. So the people we want to help needs to be the central theme of this, not just the technology, the physical infrastructure, but the people. And I call this the human factor. The first one, the human factor.
Okay.
The second one is that development takes place in a natural environment, a natural and human environment, which means that all this topic you have brought today in this interview about sustainability is central, and I think you have hit the spot, is central to whatever we are going to do in the future. And I will call this the nature and ecological factor. Actually, development necessitates organizations, institutions, that needs to be congruent, needs to be in balance with their incentives and the goals we want to attain. For example, sustainable development goals needs institutions, needs organizations that are congruent with the sustainable development goal. I call this third sort of universal thing the institutional factor. But actually nothing can be done if we don't understand that development takes place in a culture. Development takes place with material factors and with the spiritual factor. Development is not only about development buildings, it's about development people, developing ourselves. So development is really inserted in values, in belief system, in habits, in customs, in relations of mutuality, in local traditions, in indigenous wisdom. I say we because I was thinking about the World Bank, but I saw in my career tremendous failures in development because we did not take into account culture, values, and beliefs. So I call this the spiritual factor. And finally, I think development is about making choices. Today, very complex choices, but we have to choose. And in a world that is becoming increasingly complex, even the environmental issues are becoming increasingly complex. We need to have a way not to violate, basic principles of society. So I call this the ethics and moral factor, because as an economist, 90% of my work has been on ethical and moral issues and not in calculations as an economist and mathematics and calculus of economics. So I would say the human factor, the nature and ecological factor, the institutional factor, the surrounding institution, the spiritual factor, and the ethics and moral factors. Now, this, of course, these factors in every country are accelerated in pace or decelerated in pace, depending on several variables, like war and conflict, like climate change, like the role of the multilateral institutions, pollution, the destruction of biodiversity, migration, security, and so on. That, I would say, are my 5 little nuggets after 50 years of experience.
Very well said, Dr. Alfredo. I feel that if any country is able to create a robust economic foundation and a cohesive social fabric, they would be, automatically leading their citizens on a higher path of growth and development. So a simple question in the end, please. Dr. Alfredo, what are human beings lacking in perspective? What is ailing the world spiritually, and what can heal it?
Hasina, let me say, since it's the last question, that I am a very optimistic human being. It is possible to have a prosperous future. It is possible to have a vision of our collective future, of our livelihood in this planet. But when we talk about what is lacking, I think we need to know that the common denominator in development, in business, in government, in governance, the common denominator is people, is us. This sounds like very basic, but it's very fundamental, because the responsibility is on our shoulders, not in someone else's shoulder. So today we need to stop pursuing our own selfish interest. We need to understand that pursuing one's own self-interest will not really get to the collective interest. We see it on environment, we see it on security, we see it on many, many aspects of the so-called public goods that I mentioned earlier. We have today weak awareness. We are too distracted. We are on too many things that are not necessarily relevant. People need to be happier. We lack of happiness. Life should be all happiness. We need to eliminate suffering. We need to eliminate those aspects of economics, politics, and business that create suffering. We are human beings, but we have little humanism. This is a dream of mine, to have an education system, a societal system that creates this new planetary being. Young people, the youth, are in a different planet than the planet I was when I was a youth. We live in a planetary society. We need a human being that is capable to transforming himself in others without losing his own identity. I would like to say we want some new narratives to end. We need to construct what I call, and my teacher called, the 200% society. A society that is not only materially rich, but is a society that is spiritually rich. It is important that we transcend and resolve. We need to transcend first and then resolve. Many people want to resolve things without transcending, particularly to transcend individual materialism. This is the most powerful form of decay in our societies. We need a new consciousness to do this. And this consciousness needs a more refined mind, because the world is becoming more and more complex.
Yes.
So it is imperative to provide each and every citizen of this planet with a skillful means, with intelligent means, to be able to address the future. The future is nothing to do with regard to the past. And I think it's very difficult to even predict the future with the past. So the young generation will have a tremendous challenge to live in this world as a collective society. And we need a 200% society, in the sense that we have to be materially rich, because I have nothing against materiality, but we have to be at the same time spiritually rich.
Right.
We cannot live in a society that because it wants to become materially rich, it leaves behind moral values, belief systems, virtues, and the practice of spirituality. It is imperative today that every government, that every political party stop the practicing of economics, government, and business an ethical value. I am optimistic. And here I like to end my answer by saying we have 5 choices. 1 is I don't see the problem. 2, I see the problem, but I negate it. 3, I am always against the solution. But the last one, the most important one, is become architect of change. Otherwise, the future, all people will become victims of change. Thank you.
Awesome. Your philosophies are, profound. I'm sure the youth everywhere in the world and leaders looking further improvement in their work and thoughts would benefit a lot from this conversation. Thank you very much for talking to me and First India, Dr. Alfredo.
Thank you.
Stay healthy, take care, and namaste from India.